Assemble! Stay dandy, baby. The ladies come out to fight in the latest episode of Jujutsu Kaisen. That's right, this episode is filled to the brim with lots of amazing sorceress battles. The battle for the honor of the Zenin clan in what is arguably one of the best episodes of the entire series. I don't know how Jujutsu Kaisen continues to be this fucking awesome with every single episode, but here it is, again. It is fantastic. There's not a lot to chew on in terms of this episode, in terms of story. Really, it just delivers a ton of action. But a lot of this episode is mostly dedicated to both Maki and Mai, two sisters who are from the Zenin clan. And what's really interesting about both of them is how dramatically different they are in terms of abilities as well as personality. With Mai having the distinctive ability to be able to see curses and use cursed abilities, and Maki, who cannot do either of these things. She can't see all these weird cursed creatures around her, she can't sense them, she can't use any particular cursed abilities, she simply just has to use her weapons and her wit. And she's always been a remarkably interesting character when she was introduced, but this is the one that really showcases that she is just plain badass. The battle against her sister is an emotional battle, and it's also action-packed and has a lot of twists and surprises, but it's just one of the many amazing things about this episode, so let's go ahead and break down some of the biggest parts of this one. So this episode immediately picks up from the end of the last one, where Kasumi Miwa was battling against Maki, and Maki pretty much takes complete and total charge of this entire fight, and this really surprises Miwa to the point where she gets pushed against a wall and has to use some of her secret abilities. The fact of the matter is, Maki has trained her entire life to use cursed weapons, thus she's very proficient in them and has a lot of interesting tricks up her sleeves. She's kind of like a ninja with all the different abilities that she has, and that ties directly in how she actually ends up defeating Miwa in this episode. And I was really hoping that Miwa was going to do something a little crazier, as I just really love her character, mostly because I like her design. But the fact of the matter is, Maki is just way more experienced actually when it comes to battling. Despite the fact that she's only what's considered a grade 4, she really should be a grade 2. And there's this really great scene where Miwa decides she's going to use one of her trump card abilities, where essentially she creates this small domain space around her, similar to like a domain like that the other characters have created, except it's a little bit smaller. But if you ever like go within this space, she will immediately be able to attack anything with extreme precision with her sword. And Maki takes extreme advantage of this by taking her massive staff, splitting it in half, throwing it at Miwa so that she will immediately start to deflect it, giving her an opportunity to find an opening by throwing a freaking kunai. Yes, like I said, she's a freaking ninja, basically being able to not only defeat her and make her look like a fool, but even stealing her sword in the process. Basically, Miwa loses, and this is just another great scene to establish that Maki is someone that you don't want to fuck with. The next part of the episode, we finally get one of the main characters having a really epic battle, and it's Nobara, and I'm glad that we finally got to see this, as I always really loved her abilities when they introduced her in the series, the fact that she uses like voodoo dolls and a hammer and some freaking nails, but she actually ends up battling against Momo the witch, who, as her name would imply, she's a witch, she's also kind of a bitch. She tries to beat down Nobara in a more psychological kind of manner, telling her what it truly means to not only be a Jujutsu sorcerer, but also a woman at the same time. And this type of attitude is just not going to work with Nobara at all, as she manages to trick her throughout the course of this entire battle, seeming as if she's actually missing her with all of her nails. Actually, she's planting them all over the forest, which sort of act as like these distractions, allowing her to not only get closer and climb up these trees, grabbing a piece of her broom so that she can depower it with the power of her voodoo, but also so that she can get close and finish her off. And as opposed to utilizing her regular hammer, which, as she said, would basically crack her skull and kill her, she ends up taking her out in a very funny fashion with what is effectively a squeaky hammer. And she ends up like decking her in the face with this multiple times, and I can't imagine that it hurt all that much, but I also imagine that this was probably just an extreme blow to her overall ego. And while this is a really triumphant moment for Nobara as she's able to get past all of this stuff and live up to the fact that she's a hard, strong, badass woman, she ends up getting taken out by a rubber bullet because Mai's just hanging out in the woods and basically snipes her from afar. And while this is disappointing in some senses, it does lead to what is the best part of the episode, which is the battle battle between Maki and Mai. And this is such a fantastic fight. I especially love it because not only do we get a really great battle out of it, but they also manage to build upon these characters a little bit more, going into a backstory all about them, and why Maki actually decided to leave the Zenin clan in the first place. So it's already been established that she can't see cursed things and she can't use curse abilities, and because of this, she's sort of looked down upon by her clan, to the point where basically her entire lot in life is to essentially be an endeavored servant, which is kind of boring, to be perfectly honest, and she doesn't want any part of this. She actually has hopes and dreams of aspirations of being a great Jujutsu sorcerer. Opposite of this is her sister Mai, who is gifted, but doesn't really want to have anything to do with Jujutsu sorcery at all. She's scared by all these monsters. Who can blame her? A lot of the creatures in the show look freaky as hell, and the fact that she sees them all the time and doesn't want to see them really affects the fact that she's been sort of like forced into all of this, because at one point in time when Maki's a little bit older, she decides to leave the clan, much to the shock and humor of the clan leader, some dude who looks like he's basically just getting hammered on some sake, and she decides to leave, claiming that she will return and that she will be leading the clan someday. And this sort of forced Mai into this position where she had to become a Jujutsu sorcerer, something that she did not want to do, and this allowed her to grow a lot of... And this causes her to have a lot of resentment for her sister, claiming even that she hates her, because if it wasn't for her leaving the clan, they could have lived a life of comfort, a normal life that she would have always wanted. Instead, she's been forced to have to try and hone her abilities and go up against things that ultimately make her shit her pants every day. And that's why this battle is so intense, not because of the rivalry between the characters, but of the resentment that Mai has for Maki. And it makes a really interesting battle, as Maki is really going all out to prove that she has become an amazing warrior. I mean, you gotta realize, she doesn't have the signature abilities of the Jujutsu sorcerers, but she's able to go, like, toe for toe, blow for blow with her sister the entire time, just using normal weapons, and continuing to still use Miwa's sword, which I think is really friggin' awesome. But there's this great scene where it looks like she's actually going to be able to finish off her sister in like the blaze of glory without Mai being able to do anything really all that surprising, because basically her abilities amount to her just shooting a gun. But there's a little bit more to that gun. I mean, there had to be, just the fact that she can use Jujutsu sorcery. And she uses this bit of trickery where she's using a revolver, and as most people know, a revolver has 6 shots. So Maki, of course, is taking advantage of this, realizing that after the 6 shots, she'll be able to get in there and win the day. And that's essentially what happens until we get to learn that Mai actually has this special ability which allows her to literally create a brand new bullet basically out of thin air. And it's not exactly a manifestation, because if you use that with Jujutsu sorcery, as they explain in this episode, the bullet would eventually disappear after its use. This is an actual physical object which is like brought into this world and created, so it's actually going to stay there. And basically she uses the fact that she has a revolver as a way to trick her enemies. She fires off 6 shots, they think she's out of ammo, but then she creates that final bullet, which is basically going to be her trump card to take out her opponents. And it looks like it's going to work. And this shot is full on awesome. I love when Maki's getting ready to get up in her face and she's about to be blasted by this thing, when suddenly Maki proves again that you just don't need these abilities to take on cursed enemies. You just have to have a strong will and possibly a superhuman fucking body. She ends up grabbing this bullet right as it's fired at her and then manages to take out her sister by knocking her out with the blunt side of her sword. This was so awesome, and it's just one of the many amazing fights which have been taking place in the middle of this whole Tokyo versus Kyoto arc, and it was a great showcase for these sisters and building them up just a little bit more. Most of this episode did revolve around this episode, their backstory, and the relationships that they formed with all these other people, and it all tied perfectly into this entire episode. So what's the rundown on the latest episode of Jujutsu Kaisen? This was just another great one. I've loved every single arc of the series thus far, but so far this entire tournament has been nothing short of satisfying and really fun to watch, mostly because they're not only giving us a lot of really solid action, which is done with great production value, but they're building upon the characters all at the same time. And Maki and Mai are two characters that I didn't care about that much until this arc, until this episode, where they managed to give them a surprising amount of depth in the middle of this amazing episode, which has tons of action dedicated to it. You know, it's not even just them, it's just the fact that Nobara actually got a surprising amount of development in this episode. Again, something that I think has been sorely missing from the show. And the show's ability to also spend time with all these side characters and not just let it be like all about the main character of Yuji is also really, really great. I mean, Yuji doesn't even really appear throughout this entire episode, aside from a few like side scenes and maybe even like a flashback sequence or two. This one right here really focuses on those side characters and why they're doing what they're doing. And it was fascinating. Maki is now a more fully fleshed out character than she ever was before, and you can see how she's had an influence on Nobara as well. That actually was instrumental in her battle against Momo as well, as she is determined to become her very own woman and not be influenced by other people's thoughts. That's why Momo's plan against her did not work at all. She's not going to break through that brick wall, which is Nobara Kugisaki. That moment where she takes her down with the big squeaky hammer, it's goofy, yes, but it's triumphant as all hell, and I really did appreciate that for it. Would I have liked to see more of the opening battle against Miwa? Yeah, but the fact of the matter, again, they were trying to establish that Maki is not to be underestimated. She might not have the abilities that all these other people have, but she's more than capable of holding her own and maybe even going beyond that. She's been one of the surprise characters in this arc, and man, I just can't wait to see what the other members of the team are going to do, especially Inumaki, I believe his name is, the guy who like uses the speaking curse spells. They still continue to build him up in the background because he's so dangerous and unpredictable of what he could do, so I'm hoping he gets to do something in the next episode, but I'm also interested to go back to the battle between Yuji and Toto to see how that's all going to wrap up, because you know they're building up to a big final confrontation between those two, and I think it's going to be really explosive. Production value wise, I gotta praise this episode. It looked really good. The fighting choreography, the energy, the speed, all of the really cool like particle effects whenever weapons connect with one another. Just the lighting in this episode was really cool, especially the scenes with Nobara and Momo in the forest, how you could see there was a lot of really interesting dynamic lighting going on with the sunlight coming through the trees. It really just added this amazing atmosphere, and not to mention the overall speed of the episode, just the way the characters move around the battlefield and utilize their abilities. It has this unique feel to it all its own, which is really great. The way that they choreograph the scenes in this show, it's very clear that they put a lot of thought into it to make it as visually appealing as possible, and it amazes me that for the last couple episodes, they've been able to keep up that production value and never let it dip. Consistently, Jujutsu Kaisen is a show which has looked good with every single episode. Not just in terms of the animation and the action, but the character design itself, the composition, the music, everything just works in the series. And this was another fucking awesome episode. I loved this one, if you can't tell. I'm gonna give this one a 5 out of 5. But you heard my thoughts about the episode. I want to hear yours. Make sure to sound off in the comment section below and tell me what you thought about the latest episode of Jujutsu Kaisen. Did you have any favorite action scenes from this episode? What did you think of the development between Maki and Mai? And what do you hope to see from the rest of the very first season of Jujutsu Kaisen? So thank you guys so much for watching this review. If you did like this one, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. And yes, my background has changed again. I know that happens a lot in my videos, but the fact of the matter is, I work in a production studio, sometimes rooms get filled up, and we're always trying to experiment and change with new things, so just work with me on this one. I just conveniently had all this stuff set up, so I figured it would be the perfect opportunity to get this video out. Plus, I didn't want it to be late. I wanted to get my Jujutsu Kaisen review out on time. I was determined to do that this week. Literally, I watched the episode which just came out like an hour ago, so yeah, I'm finally getting this one out early. I'm really happy about that. But yeah, that's basically it. Just wanted to address that. I also want to go ahead and take this time to thank all of my patrons. You guys are the real Jujutsu sorcerers because you're watching my videos, you're leaving great comments, and you're making monthly donations. Can't thank you enough for that. Remember, first-time donators, I'll review an anime series of your choice, as well as adding your name to this list of credits. You guys are the producers, the sorcerers of Ace Guru. So thank you guys so much for watching this review. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.